our business has been and always will be about relationships. The people matter. The people are everything. If we can use the technology like AI, if it can free us up to have those relationships with kids and their families, use it.
Welcome to Innovating Education. I'm Dr. Riley Williams, and in each episode, we explore bold ideas and breakthrough strategies shaping the future of teaching and learning. Today's guest, Dr. Christopher Harrington, is a national leader in edtech, blended learning, and innovative school design. With over 30 years of experience as an educator, administrator, and researcher, he's helped districts nationwide implement cutting-edge student-centered models. So whether you're an educator, administrator, or simply passionate about the future of learning, this conversation is one you won't want to miss. Let's dive in. Dr. Harrington, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Riley. It's a pleasure.
So, Dr. Harrington, you've been leading innovation in education for years, and now you have not one, but two exciting new initiatives that have just launched. The first being digitallearningworks.org, where you've teamed up with Eddy, a virtual guide dedicated to supporting quality assurance in K-12 digital learning programs. And in parallel, you've played a key role in the launch of the AccredVEd, an accreditation initiative developed by the Virtual Learning Leadership Alliance. This effort has already brought together 20 statewide virtual programs committed to advancing best practices and ensuring quality in online education. Can you tell us more about both of these initiatives and the impact you hope they'll have on the future of digital learning?
Yeah, certainly. Certainly a lot to talk about. Well, I guess to start, Digital Learning Works. So, as you mentioned, I'm with the PowerEd Research Institute, serving as the founder. It's a 501c3 nonprofit. And the Digital Learning Works is actually a project of that nonprofit, of the Research Institute. And in my background, I was a technology director and virtual program director for years, spanning 15 years in administration, I guess it is. And as a leader, as administrator in those kinds of roles, you're constantly looking for resources and providers of service for you. As a tech director, it could be your internet access, it could be your technical hardware, things like that. But as a virtual learning leader, curriculum, professional development, these different products and services. And Digital Learning Works is something I wish I had back when I was in that kind of a role, because the whole purpose is to have these vetted resources that are really focused on digital learning, whether it's fully online learning or blended or any kind of tech-rich instruction. Having this kind of a hub, if you will, to provide, like I said, these vetted resources for school leaders so they don't have to go hunting and have to necessarily be subject to some canned sales pitches that sometimes happens from providers. So that's the whole purpose of it. So when you go to digitallearningworks.org, you go to that website, you see a marketplace, and inside that marketplace is the listing of all these different services, again, all around digital learning. And there's real people, real passionate people behind it, vetted individuals and companies. So it was really designed to be that, not necessarily a one-stop shop, but it's a place you can trust.
Well, Dr. Harrington, I want to talk a bit more about Digital Learning Works and Eddy. I looked at it. I love it. You have Eddy, which again is a free resource who we'll talk about in just a minute. You've allowed free access to several academic publications. Many of your consultants are contributing to a fantastic blog, which I actually read. Your organization is providing consulting, leadership coaching, customized research projects, comprehensive needs assessments, and like you said, you're even offering PDs.
Yeah, we do a lot of this, right? So the whole idea is to give this 360-degree support for leaders who are trying to do the right things for kids and the adults that serve them. Eddy is a chatbot. It's an AI chatbot. And the idea of Eddy came about because I do a lot of consulting myself. I do a lot of coaching myself. And in providing that coaching, I might meet with folks every 2 weeks, every month. Sometimes it's longer than a month, depending on how people's schedules go, the time of year. And sometimes there just needs to be some sort of a resource or a thought partner that you can talk to. And Eddie, I tried to create Eddie with the persona of a real person, has a personality. One thing I didn't mention to you last time we talked was you can actually ask her jokes about digital learning, have her tell you some jokes. They're not great jokes, but anyway, jokes nonetheless. But try to humanize her as much as possible. As a virtual learning leader myself, you're very isolated. And if you're part of a brick and mortar district and you're the virtual learning leader, a lot of times you're like on an island by yourself. And sometimes you just need that thought partner. I can't tell you how many times in the evening or late at night or super early in the morning, I have questions. I want to know how to do something. I need a section for my handbook that I'm writing for my teachers, or I need to structure some professional development. Who's my thought partner at 4 o'clock in the morning? So Eddie is that extension of a coach or a consultant that you might hire. And I started thinking about Eddie and how we could actually evolve that tool to be so much more. And so now you mentioned that Eddie is free, and yes, Eddie is free. We have actual deeper plans for Eddie through some statewide solutions that we're putting together too. But the whole idea was I can't be in all places at all time. And I know there are people who need access to some thought partners. Eddie's really smart. Like you can load Eddie up with all kinds of documents and research. In fact, national standards for quality, we trained Eddie on that. And all the original research that comes out of the Research Institute is actually something that Eddie's trained on too. And what she'll do is she'll take all that information. And when you ask her questions in your own context, she'll take that information and turn it around to something that you can use in your own context. So it's pretty cool that way.
Well, when we first met, you told me that I could just go crazy with Eddie and really put her to the test. So, of course, I did. And let me tell you, we had a fun conversation. So, at one point, I asked her, who's the greatest educational innovator of all time? And she gave me a very diplomatic answer. So she mentioned John Dewey, Maria Montessori, and even Kahn, but she wouldn't pick a favorite, which I really appreciated as I was testing for bias. And then I asked her for a reading list of innovative educators, and she quickly generated some great recommendations. Titles like The Innovator's Mindset by George Koros and Blended by Michael B. Horn. She really knows her stuff. So, how do you see Eddie supporting educators in their journey towards high quality digital learning?
Yeah, so I envision I think Eddie's smarter than I am right now, just because like she remembers all the stuff I train her on and my team trains her on, and she can just recall it in an instant. I think as all the way from being a school leader all the way to being a teacher in the classroom working with kids and even parents, I could see Eddie even evolving more helping parents support their children as digital learners. I think she's just going to keep growing and growing with what she can be able to do. The thing with Eddie right now is Eddie's built on today's AI. What's tomorrow's AI? Well, we don't necessarily know, but I can tell you this: if I really wanted to, I could turn her into an interactive avatar where you can actually schedule a Zoom meeting with her and have a coaching session. Now, imagine being a student in a class, and if Eddie was embedded in your class, and you start having dialogue with her, right, as a learning partner, like, wow, that's where the promise of AI could go, right? Will we take it there? That remains to be seen.
So, you mentioned that Eddie is trained on the national standards as well as all of the research that is coming out of the research institution. What kind of resources does she offer?
Well, I just asked a simple question of her one day. I said, hey, what are the national standards? I didn't even say about online learning or anything. But because of the way she's trained, she just started rattling off the national standards for quality online programs, um, which is that's what that was. She was specifically trained only on those standards at that time, and one of those standards has to deal with access and equity for kids. And I started drilling down to her and say, well, in my school, I have case managers who are helping students with IEPs. do to help support them. And then she'll give me some ideas. And then eventually I get into a conversation with her about creating an agenda for a 3 hour professional development session with those teachers. And then she recommends some things. I say, okay, let's change this here. Okay, this is what it's going to be. Now, can you go and create the support materials for that? And then she goes and creates those for me. Imagine like 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and you have to pull something together for later on in the week with your staff. And here she's creating all of this for you. And of course, you look at it and you have to vet it like you do with AI, right? But you look at it and you can make the changes, but the legwork is there. It allows me to actually do what I need to do for my teachers without investing all this time doing the actual writing. I can just review the writing and make it better. So I see that happening. You can do that with the adults. You can do that with the kids. No matter what role, if Eddie is trained properly, she can help any role within a digital learning program.
I mean, Eddie definitely provides our best practices and solutions. I will attest to that, honestly. But what are some of the most common challenges that she can help educators tackle?
If I take it all the way back to what are some of the greatest problems, say, for example, in a virtual learning program, the greatest challenges, I would say they're twofold. What happens in the teacher to student interactions, but then also what happens at the administrative level. So, how can it help teachers and students? Well, I think helping teachers, one of the things that when a teacher comes from like a brick and mortar environment into a virtual environment, they typically don't have the same skill set to be effective. So pedagogy becomes an issue. So teaching teachers and training teachers on how to teach in this virtual space. I'm working with a school right now here in Florida to develop a private Ask Eddie to help her teachers with just that. She's a principal of a virtual school, but to help with just that, drawing in their policy, their handbook, but then instructional best practices in a virtual space. So helping develop those skills for teachers is one, but then also how to develop relationships between teachers and kids in a virtual space. That's another one. And Eddie's very good at that too, giving some thoughts and ideas of how you can engage with kids, virtual learners, um, obviously synchronously and asynchronously, but then also with parents too. And then on the administrative side, sometimes administrators just don't have all of the knowledge and structures in place to be able to really unleash teachers and help them do everything that they can do. This is where the national standards for quality online programs comes in. And with Eddie being trained on that, can help those school leaders put in those structures that really help support and nurture teacher development. So that's where some big challenges are. And I'm talking about virtual learning, but just digital learning in general. It's the same thing if you're just talking about integrating technology into a brick and mortar environment. Those same challenges still exist.
So, if educators want to get started with Eddie, what's the best way to do that? And more importantly, what's the first question you think that they should ask her?
So I think, well, they can go to digitallearningworks.org. So digitallearningworks.org, right there in the main navigation, there's Ask Eddie. And you just jump right in, and it brings up a little video of her, and she'll just say who she is, how you can get started. And the first question I would say, I think to get the most out of Eddie, the way you start your conversation with her is to give her some context of who you are. I'm not saying share personal information or anything like that. You don't have to share your real name, but give some context of what your role is and what you're trying to accomplish. If you, and this comes down to like writing good quality prompts, right? So provide some context so that she can actually give you the right answer. If you just say, I'm a virtual learning leader and I need help with PD, you're going to get this really vague answer. But if you say what kind of program you are, what age group you're working with, what are some of the backgrounds of your teachers, and give a little more context, she can be far more fine tuned. And honestly, if you're not getting the answer you want, just keep digging, and over time, give her that context, and you'll get what you're looking for.
So, I want to go back to Digital Learning Works again because we
Mhm.
talked to Eddie, but it's a comprehensive suite. So, What can our listeners expect when they go just to Digital Learning Works? Who's it for, and how can educators make the most of what's offered there?
Yeah. Digital Learning Works it's really designed for school leaders, not necessarily just virtual, but just a superintendent of a traditional brick and mortar school district can go there and they can get a feeling and a sense of all the different services that are needed to really help design and implement and maintain a system-wide digital learning program that would include technology-rich instruction, virtual learning, combination of the both in a hybrid environment. But there are some products there, there are some services there. You mentioned before there's some publications there and research and blog posts. It's just a treasure trove of resources there for people to consume. It will always be free. That's part of the commitment and the mission of the Empower Ed Research Institute. Teachers can go there. Right now, it's not built out primarily for teachers, it's primarily for administrators, but there is access to some professional development and there's good learning in there. Like one of our blog posts, for example, by Desiree Mosser, it's the virtual vibe. It's just how to do this virtual teaching thing and do it in a way that you take care of yourself as a human being. And so there are some things there for teachers, but it is heavily stacked for leaders.
I want us to go ahead and switch over to accreditation.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Harrington, as virtual learning becomes more widespread, the need for clear standards and quality assurance is growing. Now, you've been involved with AccredVEd, an accreditation institute from the Virtual Learning Leadership Alliance that now includes, like I said, 20 statewide programs focused on strengthening online education. Can you tell us what makes this model different from traditional accreditation?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so the Virtual Learning Leadership Alliance, you're right. It's 20 statewide virtual programs and consortia. They are, it's the Virtual Learning and Leadership Alliance. I'll call them VLLA. VLLA actually formed a long time ago. I don't know exactly when, but it's been around for a while and they've always struggled with traditional accreditation programs. So they've been talking about this way before I became involved with them. But they reached out one day and asked if I would help them go ahead and create an accreditation program designed specifically for virtual schools. I think part of the reason they reached out to me is because I've been involved with the revision of the national standards for quality online learning over the last two revisions, so it was like the last 7 years. And directly with them, we built an accreditation program that's kind of similar in process to like your traditional Cognia, Middle States, WASC, and other accrediting bodies that are really geared towards brick and mortar. But the reason why VLLA wanted to go down this road is because the traditional accreditation programs don't really account for the virtual environment. So it's a square peg, round hole kind of effect going on there. And so they said, well, how can we do this? Because they're really good programs in VLLA. How do we actually let people know about our quality? So, looking directly at the standards, we map the accreditation program directly to the standards, to every indicator within the standard, and we assess programs according to that. And what it does is the accreditation process itself not only gives them a badge of quality for virtual learning, but it also gives them a nice, strong roadmap for continued improvement. So we do find those growth areas, and then we give some recommendations on how to move forward with that. And here's something really cool, Riley. The traditional accrediting bodies that I just mentioned, AccredVEd now has agreements with them whereby, because sometimes in legislation it says you need to be accredited by Cognia, Middle States, or WASC, and it doesn't mention AccredVEd because AccredVEd's new. But what we have now is we have these synchronized accreditation agreements with each of these bodies where all you have to do is go through an AccredVEd process, and now you have this pathway for other accreditation. So we have great relationships with these accrediting bodies, and they're fantastic. We really respect them, but they just weren't designed for virtual learning. But they recognize the quality of AccredVEd and the value. So now we've partnered, and now we can take care of both virtual and face to face in a super high quality way.
What common gaps does AccredVEd help virtual programs address?
Yeah. So there are 14 standards in the National Standards for Quality Online Programs. You have to meet every single standard in order to receive accreditation. Strategic planning, goal setting, collecting and using data to inform all the goals and your progress towards goals, and having a really structured way of monitoring and growing your quality. The accreditation program, AccredVEd, actually looks at that. That's a huge deal. And I think that's where we see some of the biggest gaps. And because AccredVEd will, you go through the accreditation process, you'll be able to see where those gaps are. And like I said, you'll get recommendations on what you need to do to take that next step to get closer to that alignment and meeting the standards.
And that leads me to my next question. What should schools know if they're considering an accreditation?
If they're considering an accreditation, and there's a lot of reasons why people would want accreditation. Sometimes it's a compliance check, sometimes it's they just want to verify the quality. Maybe they're in a competitive environment in their state and they want to be better than the next virtual program. What we care about is just programs getting better for the kids. Your motivation, that's kind of up to you. But what they need to know is that the accreditation, there's a fee for it. And it's about a 6 to 8 month process. Okay, so it's not like something, yeah, I'll try it. No, you want to be ready for it. Like you want to, so at AccredVEd, we developed a readiness tool. So on the accredved.org is the website. So if you would go to the AccredVEd website and you can download the readiness tool, it's free to use. And it has every single rubric for every single indicator and every single standard. It's what our review teams use to determine accreditation. You can go through and do a self assessment and you can kind of see where your strengths and weaknesses lie. If you're not sure where you fit on that, all you got to do is give me a call and I work with schools and help them figure out their readiness. And if they're, so you want to be ready if you're going to do it. If you're not ready, I can also provide pathways of how you can get ready. And like when you launch a virtual program, and let's face it, there were a lot that were born out of the pandemic. So it's only a couple of years ago. When you launch a virtual program, it takes a few years for you to get that level of maturity to where you're really functioning at a high level. And that's when you're going to be ready for accreditation. So if you're early on in the process, let's talk. And I can help you figure out whether or not you're really ready for it. And if you're not, that's okay too. You just are where you are. Let's grow you from there.
I love how you just said that. Okay, Dr. Harrington, we've already covered a lot: innovation, accreditation, quality assurance in virtual learning. I'd like to zoom out for a minute and talk a big picture.
Sure.
We've just talked about these massive shifts in digital learning in the last decade, and even more so, like you said, from the pandemic. But now that the dust has settled, what's next? What do you see as the next major shift in how we teach and learn? Are we headed towards AI powered classrooms, or can we expect more hybrid models in public education?
Wow, that's a huge question, Riley.
Let's
um,
take it step by step.
no, I'm good. I'm good. I got it. I think when I think back before the pandemic, and again, this is through my lens and people I work with, these are schools that are trying to be more progressive. And I believe all schools want to be there. So I'm going to generalize. Before the pandemic, there was a growing push for personalizing learning. And I've worked with schools myself and helped them develop personalized learning programs within their own context, what's appropriate for their school communities. It's not a canned product that you just, here you go, do this. And those schools, once the pandemic hit, they were amazing. Like, yeah, they had all the concerns about kids and the welfare of the families and things like that. But the academics did not take a hit because they already had the virtual pieces in place where they could shift and they had the kids with voice and choice and ownership of their own learning and things like that. So they were there already. Schools that didn't have that, those were the ones that really got disrupted. So the pandemic happened. When we came out of the pandemic, you would think that, okay, well, when things settle down, we'll start moving into personalization again and pick up where we left off. To me, the reality is AI, in particular ChatGPT, became very prominent and very much, I don't want to say a distraction because I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't want it to sound like a bad thing, but it certainly got everybody's attention and it continues to do so. I think what's happening is AI has the ability, AI has been in schools for a long time. It's been in our lives for a long time. I kind of think that ChatGPT just, everyone thinks AI and ChatGPT are synonymous, right? But they're obviously one's a subset of the other. But now that it's there and now it has the potential to really negatively impact education if we as school leaders don't get a handle on this, and not just get a handle on it to tolerate it or deal with it, it's to actually harness it. If we do this right, we can actually accelerate what we're trying to do with personalization in education. Like, think about Eddie. Eddie is built off of um, a large language model. It's built off of AI. The way I've structured it and the way we're using it is to help personalize for school leaders right now, right? Imagine if we could do something like that in our schools for teachers, for kids, for families, right? It's amazing. Now we can really start getting to that personalization. And I think the more we use technology with this in mind to empower kids, empower families, to have kids take ownership and become more invested and more engaged in their learning, I think we're onto something. And I think that's where we can go with things. AI powered classrooms, well, maybe, but that's not what's actually going to get the whole thing done. Our business has been and always will be about relationships. The people matter, the people are everything. If we can use the technology like AI, if it can free us up to have those relationships with kids and their families, use it. There's a lot of questions about it. We have some tightening up to do with our policies and some of our safety practices and student data privacy practices, but there's solutions for all of that. We just have to do it systemically and do it in a way that makes sense so that we can actually let teachers be the teachers. I remember being a teacher and I was responsible for creating all of my own content and dealing with all this administrivia things and managing all these things that I wouldn't have to do if I could use technology properly and allow it to do its work and allow me to do the human parts of the work. That's where the goal is, I think. I think that's all that parents and kids are looking for. So they're looking for that. And if the technology can get us there, I say we go for it.
I have been extremely vocal about my support for virtual learning. But another thing that I'm extremely vocal about is standardized testing. I hate standardized testing. And for me, what I like about virtual learning is the opportunity that we know every single click. We know how long the kids have been on a question, and we know what it takes to be able to answer that. So, why standardized test when we can look exactly at the data and see what's being taught, what's working, what's not working?
I couldn't agree with you more. As a teacher, I can tell you what my experience has been. Even as an administrator of a virtual program, I had access to all that data. But I had so many other things flying at me in my roles. How do you take time to do that? Okay. Yeah, I was interested and I would do it as much as I could, but I know I could have done a much better job. I think all of us in education could say that if we just had more time. And if we can then take that and turn that around into action to help kids and be more responsive to where they are at the moment, I think we can do a phenomenal job. How do we use the tools, the technology, the AI to process that information? Standardized test scores, to a certain extent, I see value in that. That's not going to change my actions day to day, moment by moment. It's not going to help me figure out how to work with this one kid in this family because of a recent trauma they've been through. Like, it's not going to touch it. It's a data point, and that's fine. But understand, as soon as you get that data, it's old data too, right? So there's that. How do you get the freshest and the most recent data to help you take your next step with that kid or that family? I think, I know there's ways to do it. I mean, and I've done it in different ways in different capacities, but systemically, that's the big. tough nut to crack, I think.
Well, think about it as a student might be having a conversation with Eddie. That's your last data point.
That's right. Well, it's funny you should say that because one of the things I do with Eddie, part of my ongoing training with her, and it's not just me, I have other folks who do this too. We go back into the back end of the tool and we can see where conversations start to fall apart. And we can go in and then we can retrain, right? So we're collecting that data to make Eddie better. But to your point, if a student is having a conversation with Eddie, and let's say teachers have access to what those conversations are, wow, now you're kind of eavesdropping on an academic conversation that can give you a ton of insight. Like,
Exactly. I mean, it's really true. Technology is evolving so much faster than policy. We're seeing AI, virtual reality, personalized learning models advancing, but especially in Oklahoma, schools are still debating things like should we allow cell phones? So, how do we close that innovation gap in education?
I like to think that people will step up and do the right thing. But I also know that there's a tremendous amount of inertia in education. And sometimes disruptors like what we're seeing now, just with LLMs, the ChatGPT and other large language models, it's such a small part of AI that, and it's being so disruptive right now because it's a threat to our status quo, how we've operated. Sometimes that's what we need. Maybe a kick in the tail like this is something that's going to help. Um, I don't know what the answer is, Riley, but I do know this. Um, it's not going to slow down. I remember when I'm dating myself here, but I remember when laptops we started doing one-to-one initiatives in schools, and it was a luxury to have that. How do you not have that now? Like, it's not even, how can you even think about that? Not having a laptop for every student. I get it. There's some inequities and there's funding issues and finances are a problem still in a lot of communities. But AI is not going to slow down. This is the world that these kids live in now and will be living in the future. If we are not teaching this stuff and using these kinds of tools, parents are going to they're going to go elsewhere. We're seeing it already. The pandemic should have been a wake up call for us, I think. But there aren't many schools that I work with right now that aren't losing enrollments. And where are the kids going? They don't always know either. They just know their enrollments are declining. I don't think population is declining. They're going somewhere. So I think what's happening here is parents are choosing other options. Now, are they choosing the best options? I don't know. I don't know. But I think think about it if you're a business, if you own a corner shop in a neighborhood, and fewer people start coming in to see you, maybe you're not selling the right stuff. And I think that's going to happen. The sad part is not all schools are able to, they don't have the same resources and wherewithal to be able to navigate such a huge change and disruptive change like we're seeing right now. So I think some of it is like systemic across our country at the state level, at the national level, um, just within education, and that certainly needs to be addressed. But the technology is not going to stop. The reality of our kids' futures and what the world they're going to be living in is not going to stop just because we can't figure it out in education. There will be other things. And if we think we have it tough now, I think we're going to have it tougher if we aren't being responsive. So I have hope. I have hope. There's a lot of good people, a lot of smart people, a lot of people with heart that care about kids, and we're trying. We're trying.
I have one last question.
Sure.
What's one key takeaway that you hope educators walk away with from today's conversation?
I think what I really want people to walk away with is there are resources out there, and there are great examples at the teacher level, at the administrator level, at the family level. There are success stories out there. And this does work. That's why we came up with digital learning works. We know it does. We've been in this space long enough to know. You just need to know how to do it in your context. And that starts with reaching out to some folks. I would highly recommend connecting to a larger network outside of your own district. When I was a teacher, I didn't know much about my own district. When I became a district administrator, I knew about the district, but I didn't know much about what's going on around my county or my state. When I started working at the national level and international level, it's like, oh my gosh, there's so much out here. There's so many exemplars to choose from. You just have to find them. And the network will help you get there. I'm reachable through that. I'm really easy to find online. I can help connect you to people too. So just know that there is a way. What you're dreaming of and what you really wish was in place is possible, and it is happening in other places. We just have to get you and your district there.
Dr. Harrington, I can't tell you how excited and how grateful I am that you came onto the show today. So, for our listeners, I just want to remind you that I will go ahead and post all of Dr. Harrington's work, Digital Learning Works, AccredVEd, to the show notes. And I hope that this conversation has been inspiring to you. So, until next time, keep learning, keep inspiring.